Panelists for the second panel, Mr. Shankar Venkateswaran, co-founder and managing partner, Sustainability Integration, ECube Investment Advisors, and former chief of Tata Sustainability Group. Ms. Preeta Misra, Senior Director, CBIG, ESG and SME, Dun & Bradstreet India. Mr. K Baheti, Director, Alembic Pharmaceuticals Ltd. Mr. Sanjeev Shah, Chartered Accountant, Shah Sanjeev and Associates, and Mr. Soumitra Purkayastha, Head of Sustainability, Asia Pacific Region, FMC Corporation. The second panel discussion today will be focusing on investors' perspective, unlocking ESG value. The panel will discuss the role of investors in driving ESG integration, investor expectations, strategies, and impact on business decisions, link between ESG performance and financial returns, and the challenges, opportunities, and potential reforms for a conducive ESG ecosystem in India. The panel will also discuss on the importance of ESG for MSMEs. We have with us the panel chair, Mr. Shankar Venkateswaran, co-founder and managing partner, Sustainability Integration, ECube Investment Advisors. Mr. Shankar Venkateswaran was one of the two co-authors to draft the National Guideline on Responsible Business Conduct, NGRBC, released by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and its companion, BRSR, mandated by the Securities and Exchange Board of India. His work career of about 40 years has almost equally divided between mainstream business consulting, social development, and business sustainability. Since retiring as the head of sustainability of the Tata Group in 2017, he has been involved in several activities in the larger development and business space. He is a part of founding team of ECube Climate Finance, which is setting up a lending platform to address adverse climate change impacts. He is engaged with a movement called Yuva Shakti that hopes to pilot ways to enable young people to be constitutionally and politically active, and has been associated with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs on matters relating to responsible business conduct. Mr. Venkateswaran sits on the board of several NGOs and social enterprises and currently chairs Oxfam India and the CSR Trust for Sustainable Development Goals in India. Next on the panel, we have Ms. Preeta Misra, Senior Director, CBIG, ESG and SME, Dun & Bradstreet India. Ms. Misra is a Senior Director at DNB India and heads the Credibility and Business Insights Group along with the ESG and SME verticals of Dun & Bradstreet India. She is a business leader who manages different businesses, P&Ls, successfully, including the self-rating business. Apart from this, she is responsible for growing the ESG and SME portfolio and working on various initiatives focused on the government, both central and state. Ms. Preeta has a rich experience of 27 years, including 17 years with DNB. Prior to joining DNB, Ms. Preeta was the MD and CEO of Business Asia Consulting Private Limited for 5.5 years. Prior to that, she was the CEO of Invest India Economic Foundation for almost 3 years. Ms. Preeta has an MSc from Calcutta University and a postgraduate diploma in management from the Birla Institute of Liberal Arts and Management Sciences, Kolkata. Next on panel, we have Mr. K Baheti, Director, Alembic Pharmaceuticals Ltd. Mr. Baheti is a commerce graduate and a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He is also a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India with wide and varied experience in finance, accounts, taxation, and management. Mr. Baheti is the Director, Finance and CFO at Alembic Pharmaceuticals, a 116-year-old Indian multinational pharmaceutical company headquartered in Vadodara. Next in panel, we have Mr. Sanjeev Shah, Chartered Accountant, Shah Sanjeev and Associates. Mr. Shah is a practicing CA and certified fraud examiner having more than 32 years of experience in areas of mergers and acquisitions, forensic investigation, corporate restructuring, business acquisition strategies, and sustainable reporting assurance. He is a science graduate having additional professional certifications in cybersecurity, forensic and audit analysis, business responsibility and sustainable reporting, BRSR, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud computing, data science, and blockchain. The next panelist is Mr. Soumitra Purkayastha. He is the head of Sustainability, Asia Pacific Region, FMC Corporation. Mr. Soumitra is a chemical engineer from BITS Pilani and has completed the Executive Management Program of Manchester Business School, UK. After working in several manufacturing, technical, R&D and project management roles with the global chemical leader ICI PLC in the late 1980s and 90s, Mr. Soumitra moved to FMC Corporation, a global diversified chemical company, in 2000. At ICI, he worked in different manufacturing sites across India and UK. At the time of his departure from the organization, he was the Vice President Research, Technology and Projects. At FMC, he has held a variety of different roles, including supply chain, sales and strategic marketing in the agricultural science business. He has also set up and managed the lithium business of FMC in India. He is currently leading the sustainability function for FMC in the Asia Pacific region. I would now like to request Mr. Tarak Patel, the President of FGI, to felicitate our esteemed panelists with a memento. Thank you, Mr. Patel. I would now request the panel chair, Mr. Shankar Venkateswaran, to moderate the panel discussion.
Thank you. And I thank the Federation of Gujarat Industries for this very kind invitation. I now speak for all my fellow panelists for the absolute privilege of being asked to chair this session. We have, as you know, a wonderful bunch of panelists. So I'm going to leave it to them to provide the wisdom because there is so much reciting there, so much experience reciting there. I'm just going to start with a bit of opening remarks and then hand it over to the panelists. The format we're going to follow is that we will request each panelist to make a presentation. Some of them have slides that they want to present. So we'll request each panelist to do that, take a pause, invite some questions from the participants, then go on to the next panelist. And once we are done, we'll open it up for questions again and hopefully try and complete it by 1. I know that this conference has started on time, which I come from Delhi. Nothing in Delhi ever starts on time. So I'm very impressed with, I've always been impressed with the Gujarati culture and I can see it in action. So I better not be the spoiler in this. The good thing is we have lunch after this, so we can always eat a bit into lunch with permission from Sameer. So let me start by just giving some opening remarks. So I think the morning has been very productive. we've got a fairly good and diverse insight into what ESG is about and in the context of what it means for business. I think that is fairly clear. So I'm not going to dwell too much upon it, but other than to just underline a few things. The starting point is that we just got to understand that the traditional factors of business success. Now, if you ask any CEO, and I've done this in the Tata Group, I've done it elsewhere, if you ask any CEO what does business success mean, she or he would say typically three things: profitability, growth of profitability, and longevity. You want to be forever, right? That's typically how a company CEO sees the company. And in order to do that, we've been taught in business schools all the kinds of things that we need to deal with capital, with human resources, with technology, customers, quality. So all of the that we've been taught in business schools. And in fact, it's these verticals also that get reflected in companies. If you look at departments, you have that each department faces a different stakeholder. Now that is absolutely the way it should be. And these factors will always be important. But what has emerged, as we've seen from this morning's discussion, is a whole bunch of factors that have always been there, but have become more prominent. And these are what we call the E&S factors. G's always been an important way of how companies need to run. But the E&S factors, whether it's climate change, whether it's pollution, but also a lot of S factors. You know, unfortunately, one of the things that happens in an ESG discussion is it inevitably goes to climate and remains over there. But there's pollution. I come from Delhi. Ask me about pollution. Look at rivers, look at landfills. There's so much of that. The whole issue of inequality is important, and unfortunately, inequality is going the wrong way. And there's plenty of studies that show that, including Oxfam, which I chair, and the kind of work we do on inequality. The whole issue around human rights and informalization of the workforce, that is something which is also evident. So these other factors are increasingly going to impact that same three things that a CEO wants: profitability, growth, and longevity. And so a business that wants to look at and survive and be and grow and have that longevity needs to look at what are these non-traditional factors for success. And that's really the whole summary of what ESG is about. That you've got to understand it from the business context. It has to make business sense, and increasingly that's what is happening. There's growing evidence that all of this, there's a business reason to why you need to be worrying about ESG, and that's what a lot of my panelists are going to explore. And we're going to also explore how some of the stakeholders see this. That is a segue into the stakeholders. If you look at all these factors, what is pushing companies to look at these factors seriously, to look at climate change, to look at pollution and so on very seriously? It's stakeholders. Typically, a company takes three stakeholders very, very seriously. It takes its investors seriously, it takes its customers very seriously, and it takes regulation very seriously. This will continue, but all of these stakeholders are asking different questions. Investors are asking ESG questions, and we will talk about that in some detail, hopefully, as we go along in the session. But investors are, sure, they're concerned about what's happening on their returns, because as one investor told me, there are only two emotions that drive investors: fear and greed. And ESG is a source of fear, because their fear is that the investments will go down the tube. So they're not doing it out of any level of philanthropy. They are protecting their interests. So investors are pushing this agenda, but customers are asking the same questions, which is why you have more and more companies sort of looking at this, consumer companies taking this more seriously, which is why Unilever has a sustainable living plan. And that is not just for its consumers, it also goes down to its value chain. So Tata Chemicals, a Tata company when I was there, took its sustainability very seriously because it was a matter of value. But the huge business benefit that accrued to it, because it was taking ESG and sustainability seriously, is it became a preferred supplier to Unilever globally. So the business benefits start accruing, and you can see that. Communities, and let me again give you a bad Tata example, or what happened to Tata Motors in Shingur, for example. And if you don't manage communities, because communities and not governments are giving you the license to operate. And if you ask Coke as to why their plant in Plachimada and Kerala is shut down, you will know that it is because communities shut them down, and they've been shut down for more than a decade and a half. And that's true for Vedanta, that's true for many others, and so on. So the number of pressure points on a company that is pushing companies, even the reluctant companies, to sort of behave in a manner that's sustainable is increasing, and the nature of what they do. A Tata example, again, is just an illustration of a general truism that more and more employees wish to join and stay with companies that care. And that's a truism globally. It is increasingly truism in India. So I think you have these multiple pressure points on companies saying that we can't therefore only stick with our traditional stuff that we were taught in business school 40 years ago, but look at things that are more current, more obvious, and I think that's the challenge, and that's the challenge our panelists are going to bring to this discussion. One last thing before I open it up to my panelists. One of the things that there's a lot of, whenever we talk about ESG, I think there's a lot of confusion and let's say, emphasis on two things. One is disclosures, and the other is ESG ratings. Now, both are important, but neither of them tell you what constitutes sustainable behavior. You're always gaming it. You're asking what the reporting framework is saying, and saying, okay, so therefore I need to do this. But actually behind that is a whole range of sustainability frameworks that help companies decide or determine what constitutes sustainable behavior. The first of them, which we briefly heard in the morning also, was the triple bottom line. John Elkington's famous triple bottom line, which said you need to find that balance between the 3 Ps or the 3 Es, or call it what you want, but that balance. You have the UN Global Compact, which came about with a set of 10 principles. You have the ISO 26000, and you have our own very national guidelines for responsible business conduct. And I have a soft spot for it because I was one of the drafters of that NGRBC for the ministry. And that tells you what it means for a company in India, in an Indian context, to be responsible. So it is actually suggesting a set of actions that you can take. So rather than just gaming from what a report says or what the rating says, it's important to look behind that and look at frameworks. And that then tells you a few things. That tells you what constitutes sustainable behavior. That also tells you that this is not a destination. It is a journey. And I think it's important that we all recognize that it's not a binary. Either you're ESG or you're not. If you are on a journey, and it depends on where you are on the journey, but you have to get onto that train. Otherwise, the train's going to leave the station. And that's really what we're going to be discussing today with our panelists. So and thanks for indulging my tirade in the beginning, but I just thought I needed to get this and express these thoughts. But I'm going to go straight to Soumitra. And Soumitra, I'm going to ask you, from your experience, you are now the head of sustainability for a very large company group. And I think just to tell us what kinds of challenges you face, how your company is addressing them, and perhaps an investor angle to it, because in a sense, how does that drive what FMC does in its behavior would be very interesting to hear. Over to you, Soumitra.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very, very nice introduction. And also to my fellow panelists who are extremely well versed in their own areas, so I'm sure they will contribute a lot more. I will just try to give you a practical perspective, because I have been in manufacturing. I have been asked questions like, "Ye sustainability kya hai yaar? What is all this?" People have asked questions like that, and quite often we've had problem answering it, even though there is so much information. So, I've tried to understand it in my own, but I will give you one example where a company decides that they will at least, besides profit, see, because without profit we cannot survive. It's as simple as that. So profit is a given. If you don't have profit, after some time the entire engine will stop, the employment will stop. So profit is not a bad motive at all. It's an excellent motive to run a company, because that's what gives growth, that what gives employment. So profit is absolutely, one can't. But is there something beyond profit? So I'll give you an example of safety. And safety, what we said to ourselves is we owe it to our families that when we go to work, we come back in the same way that we left from work. At least this is a human thing, right? It's nothing to do with companies. And isn't it personal? It's very personal. It's very personal to me, as a human being. So let's put this thought, like with our own employees. Wouldn't you want to do that? You have a loving family waiting for you at the end of the day. They want to see you back so that you can enjoy, you can spend time together. Just a simple thing like that. Nothing about, safety standards. That comes later. So I think we need to have these kind of thoughts first set in as values, and I tell you, this comes from the top. You can't have the managing director of the company preaching safety but behaving in an unsafe way. That doesn't work. People look, people watch, and that's what I've found, that people watch. And it's very nice to sit on a podium and talk about safety, but continuously have unsafe behavior. If I sat here, the first thing I would be asked to do, if it was my company, is immediately look for what are the unsafe practices in this very podium. And I can tell you, for example, we don't allow any stairs without a rail. Simple. Does it cost a lot of money to put a railing? No. But we don't think. We didn't think about the fact that there could be someone who could have a disability. Where is wheelchair access to this podium? It isn't there, because we didn't think about it. So once you open your mind and talk about safety, it starts to translate into action. And once it translates into action, it becomes a value. And you have to communicate this value. And I'll give you one example. We have a formulation plant here in Savli, right here. And one of my relatives had said, I want to get some plant exposure. So he went there. He went there, and he had been trained in the UK, and he was in university. Every week there is a fire drill in that hostel. हमारे यहाँ पे कभी नहीं होता है. I don't know when this place they had the last fire drill, unless it's mandated by law. But there it's mandated, so they did it. So he had a very low opinion about safety here. But in that, he was coming back in a shift bus. And he was surprised in a shift bus. It's a bus, not a car. Everybody wore a seatbelt in a bus. And nobody was policing them. Nobody was watching them. Because it had become habit. So things like this. The other one I would talk about, quite important, is respect for people. I think that's another very important value. We, as FMC, are working in villages with farmers. We are selling crop protection chemicals. A lot of people have a lot of concerns about toxicity, and I think, Dr. Ranka also mentioned it. And that's a real issue. You got to address that very honestly. But when you work with farmers, if you go with the thinking that you can teach them how to do things better, you're making a massive mistake. And that's why I think we learned the quality of self-respect, of respecting others. That you got to respect the person who's doing the work and say, let's work together. And it'll be good for you. And I've not here come to talk to you. Yes, I am and you have to be honest. That's another thing I found. You've got to build trust. You've got to say, look, we are a commercial corporation. We are here. We have come to sell you our product. And that is true. You can't walk away from that. But today, we are not talking about product. Just for today. At future, if you don't want to buy our product, that's your choice. You're the customer. But I hope you will. That's all we hope. But we work and talk about something else. And at that time, if you can win their trust, we can make a big difference. And I can tell you, the problem we have now, at least in agriculture, where we are working, is we are finding that, we can talk a lot about, we can go back to where we were. But let us not forget, we were 140 crore people. Even at the time of independence, we were only 33 crores. We had a lot less mouths to feed. So many of the solutions that are being offered in the past, if you just simply apply today, then you won't hit one of the UN SDG goals of zero hunger. Today, there is a real concern that the amount of food stocks that we are growing and the demand, the gap is becoming thinner and thinner. So we have to talk about yield, we have to talk about productivity. So you can't walk away from yield. And the unfortunate fact is that productivity in Indian agriculture has now stagnated. It's not improving any further. And are you helping the cause by taking away more agricultural land? You're not. So land, though we have the second highest arable land in the world after the US, but that's slowly reducing. So are you not compelled to produce more food per acre of, you don't have a choice. So what's the best way to do it in a sustainable way? And investors, by the way, are starting to ask those questions. You would have heard about the cases of, Monsanto. You would have heard of the case of glyphosate, that particular product which has got so much attention. So investors are starting to say, hey, are you in glyphosate? So we have made a declaration in our company that we will not sell any high hazard pesticide. We've made that declaration, and we have to demonstrate that every year to the investors that the total sales of those, because we can't completely eliminate it in one shot. We need time. So we are showing that we are able to reduce it over time. And today, 0.05% of the total revenue comes from those products, and that too, we hope will become zero. But to say that overnight we will just simply remove it, it's not going to happen. So the investors are asking these questions because they are concerned, what if there is another, Bayer-like situation, Monsanto-like situation, where you got to pay compensation of a few $1 billion. Then, the investor's concern is that, his investment is therefore in jeopardy. So I think these are the aspects that we are facing. So this just to give you a flavor. Thanks.
Thanks. I think we'll, in the next round, we'll just come to, perhaps you can just delve on how has been the benefits to a business like yours from some of the practices that you followed. So we come back to that next round. But I just wanted to ask whether there's any burning question right now to Soumitra, or can that wait for, okay, go ahead.
rightly said that profit is the priority for any establishment. And when the journey starts, we are still, I mean, everybody is still unable to see other priorities. So when we are starting and try to see other thing other than profit, what kind of opportunity can we see? Say, for example, from the safety. If we take up safety as the next value, if we want to imbibe safety as a next value. So the question, I'll try to repeat, what kind of opportunities ESG can offer to an establishment so that it becomes something of interest?
Yeah. See, ESG offers tremendous opportunities. If you want to take safety, then I would say safety is good business. Is something that is people understand, because there is a cost of safety. There's a cost of having an accident in your workplace. There's a cost of having a fire in your workplace. There's a cost of losing your entire business because of unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. So therefore, safety becomes almost, I would say, and a lot of us here are from the chemical industry, where the risks are even higher. So I would say protecting yourself, protecting your property, protecting the people becomes a very fundamental requirement, and therefore safety can be one point that you can start working on. But there are many others, and we can come to that, where you save money because of sustainability. You actually save money, you expand your margin because you reduce cost. And there are plenty of examples which we can talk subsequently, particularly the four R's, as we call it, or the four R's is reduction, reuse, recovery, and recycle. Just do these four. The amount of money that can go to the bottom line is very significant. Is very significant.
Thank you. And actually many practices which we don't think as ESG are actually started as ESG, like energy efficiency, which the earlier panels had spoken about, and payback periods are less than a year. Preeta, if I may just come to you. And I think we have a lot of SMEs in the room, and that's one of the spaces that you work in. So I was just wondering if you could just give us a sort of a flavor from a MSME lens, as it were, for ESG and how that plays out, and what are some of the reasons why MSMEs need to get onto this journey, and of course, if there are some challenges that they face to that.
I have a short presentation.
Excuse me, sir.
We come back.
Yeah.
So, taking on to your question, my focus actually in the presentation is that. So first I want to ask you, I'm sure this is not the first ESG event that you guys are attending. How many of you, this is the first ESG event? So many of you, wow. Okay, how many of you, this is not the first? Okay, so equally distributed. Okay. How many of you think this is an opportunity? How many of you have that fear? My God, I don't want to do, I don't know, it's an unknown thing. Nobody? Wow. So that makes my, I think, life much easier. So we truly believe that ESG is a great opportunity for everyone, all of us, as long as we know how to use it. And I think the conference has been well designed, right? We got to understand the importance, relevance of ESG at a macro level. And spiritually, right, how even Indians, right, we do it, we just don't know what we have been doing. We've been brought up with that, okay? So that's the basic foundation. And now coming to profitability. So there is actually a huge opportunity on making money, not only making money, but making it sustainably and making sure that your businesses sustain over a long period of time. Okay? So I wanted to just focus on some of the regulations. Why are regulations important? Because if you look at any kind of new things happening, even if you look at corporate governance, right, the first thing is that the investors ask, they see the wind of change and they will say, okay, and these are only the very large listed entities. They will talk about, let me see what you're doing on corporate governance, on ESG. That is why you have in 2012, we had the top 100 companies, right? SEBI said BRR. You start disclosing what you're doing, right? So that's how it starts with the voluntary disclosures, then it moves to mandatory disclosures. The regulator gives you enough time. And then how do you measure and make sure that you're trending on the path and it's not greenwashing? So let's look at what is happening globally, and all that is mentioned here. It's very few. This has got to do with all the changes happening in 2023, this year. Okay, the German Supply Chain Act, right? This act came into force in the beginning of this year. There are, companies with more than 3,000 employees. They have to disclose on the supply chain, and this is not only, thank you. This is not only on the direct supply chain, but the indirect supply chain. So imagine the scope of it and how difficult it's going to be, right? And we have to all remember that everybody is learning, the regulators are learning, companies are learning, so there is no right or wrong. Everybody is struggling to figure this out, okay? But this is going to be the impact. And if you're supplying to Germany, to a large company, this will come to you sooner than later. And now when we are talking about long term, we are not talking about 10 years. We are not even talking about 5 years. We are talking about next year or maybe the year after that, right? And ESG is not something that you can implement in a day. It's a journey. You have to start. So the question is, when do you start? Have you started? That's the question that each one of you need to ask yourselves. Okay? The carbon border tax, right? This year in October, they have started collecting information. They are going to charge a tax on the GHG emissions. So in EU, the manufacturing companies, right, they already pay a tax looking at the amount of GHG emission that they have. To make it a level playing field, so when they are going to import now, and this is going to come in, they're going to levy the tax from 2026. And it can be anywhere between 25 to 52%. That is the range of tax. We will lose all our competitiveness if we are not prepared for it. This has been talked about for the last few years. So if you are exporting and you're in the industries which are going to get, impacted, then it's time to wake up and see what can we do to gear up for this. And these are opportunities, because if you are doing it, there could also be 10 other people who are not doing it. So you will be the first mover and you can demand business, because there is a shortage of people who are even thinking about it. Okay. Then the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, right? Again, January 2023, the European Union adopted it. Currently, the European Commission has come out with one set of standard for the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. It covers just some part of it, but they are planning to make it into a law. It will be applicable to all the European countries, excluding UK. And then they will have different standards. They're looking at coming out for standards which is sector-specific, MSME-specific, companies which are not headquartered in EU also. So this is already started again this year. Okay. Fashion Sustainability and Social Accountability Act, this is for New York. This has been going on for some time. It's not been passed. There is a huge retail lobby also in the US, but this is being tabled again this year. There's a discussion on it. Any large company, I think it's around 800 crore and above, right, turnover in the US, their supply chain, they will be responsible for. So labor, what kind of labor they use, the entire ESG spectrum. So they will have to spend, so the larger companies will have to spend. Why do they have to spend? Because they want their entire supply chain to be compliant. Now, it's a question of whether we, in the supplier ecosystem want to wait for the diktat to come from global, or we take that as an opportunity and say, I'm doing this. This is my journey. I've just started. Imagine the kind of business opportunity that you would have. Now, if I look at India, right, in India, we know about BRR, then we have the BRSR, 1,000 companies, and the BRSR 2.0 talks about the top 250 companies, their supply chain. Disclosures need to come in. Okay? And the BRSR, if you look at it, currently in that second version, the focus is on also the S part, right? India, we are looking at tier 2 suppliers, right? So it's also evolving. So look at the regulations in India also, right? And globally, it's evolving. So we should be expecting the change. It cannot be a surprise for us, right? There is funding available. We've all talked about COPs 26, 27, large amount of money going to flow into the country, developing country. It's going to come to India too, right? Are you ready to get that money? Do you have some systems in place to get it when it comes, right? Banks are looking at green finance. RBI, you know, for them, the risk lies in the climate part of it, right? The E part of it, right? So the banks have a target for green finance, green projects. Are you there asking the bank saying, I'm setting up this project, this is how I'm looking at it, give me funds at a discounted rate. It will also help you meet your environment, whatever, you know, your priority targets. So I think there's a lot of change happening. Green funds. So green funds, you know, last year the government announced a sovereign green fund, and the largest green fund has been again in UE. It's $12 billion, 12 billion euros. Can you imagine? All specifically to be used only for sustainability areas, right? So imagine the money at a global level that is being pushed into this area. It will go to companies, organizations who are ready, who are thinking about it, right? And trying to implement it in their organizations. And of course, the government has the net zero target of 2070. How will they do it if the suppliers, the SMEs, the scope 3 is not met? It's not going to happen, right? So I think everyone can make a difference. One is there is profit, there is money available. Okay. The second is the social responsibility, right? We want to leave a better planet, right? When we go for the children, their children, etc. Right? So the cause is much larger. But in the short term, if you're not looking at a larger cause, profits are there, money is available. But are you ready to go and ask for the money? Now this is the opportunity in the supply chain. All of you sit in the supply chain somewhere or the other, even the largest company, the largest listed entities. Okay. So many of these are our customers. So we, you know, DNB does, you know, supplier evaluation, etc. Walmart, look at the amount of sourcing, and this is just a trend, right? The reason that it's important for all of us, especially for the MSMEs, to understand this trend is this is your power. Companies are looking, the China Plus One policy, you know, so for example, Walmart, by 2027, $10 billion worth of products to be sourced from India annually, every year, okay? Amazon, 20 billion cumulative exports by 2025, fabulous boost for Make in India, okay? IKEA is planning to increase their sourcing from India from 25 to 50%. What stops you, if you have a proper system in place, from going to IKEA and saying, will you import from me? Will you buy from me? I have these products, right? So, and the reason that I put the trend and surveys, because trend and surveys gives us ability to understand the winds of change, right? About what are different people thinking. Is it my perception, or is everybody talking about it? So the BCG survey, for example, talks about how in the, you know, inflation adjusted terms for 2022, in US, exports from China declined by 10%, while from India it increased by 44%. Of course, China was much larger, but the point is it increased by 44%. Okay, and when they did the survey, they found that the larger companies are still looking at buying products from outside the US. Where will they go? One interesting data point that I found when I was preparing, Vietnam is becoming it's such a small country, right? What makes us not be the preferred supplier destination? You know, when you're looking at a China Plus One, why should it be Vietnam? The question is, are we ready for it? Are we going and demanding and asking it from all these stakeholders, because they are all in India. They are all committing these things. Okay. So, and all these companies are expecting to grow their exports outside US in the next 5 years. They are going to source from outside US. Okay. The QIMS sourcing survey talking about buyers paying more attention to their suppliers' practice. So they are paying more attention to how you are doing business, right? They're talking about, do you have sustainability built in? Are you thinking about it, right? So they are doing all of that, and the interest in India has increased compared to what it was a year back. So these are all, and if you look at, I think we can all create our own differentiation. Who are your stakeholders? You have the investors, you have your customers. So look at a very small thing, right? In the metros, you will find these organic products, aren't they priced at a much higher rate than the normal products? We still pay. We don't know whether it's truly organic, but we still pay. Why do we pay that? Because we believe we are getting products with less fertilizer, etc. We are getting better, pure products, right? So customers are willing to pay if we position it correctly. Okay. We are working very closely with the Agriculture Ministry for the farmers, producers, they're all talking about sustainability, right? How to use less chemicals, do it in a better way, and then export, because the demand is increasing. Okay. So, and then your employees, I don't know how many of you take this Great Place to Work. We put it very proudly as a badge, saying Great Place to Work. We see our, sorry, you have a question? So we see a lot of our customers, also do that, putting it up. It's a good selling point for us, right? To talk about that we work in an organization which is, as per certain questionnaire, makes us a great place to work. And it's a good benchmark to have, which are the top 100 best places to work, how are they better, and how can I improve my company's policies, etc., to become better. Sorry, yeah, I'll just finish this. Yeah. So this is just 2 minutes more. So this is where are you on an ESG journey? This is, I think that is very important to know. ESG is a buzzword. Whenever you have a buzzword, there's a host of information. Mother of all information is the internet. Google, go and search, right? How do you know? Without data, you will not be able to measure it. We all talk about data being the fuel, but remember, you can put the fuel in the car. Who's driving the car? You are driving the car. What is the direction the car will go? It's again you, right? So you have to decide how to use the data for your own growth, right? So this is just about DNB. We have the largest data on ESG globally. We have across more than 80 million data. It helps us benchmark, do comparison. We don't do ESG rating, we have ranking, because our, the companies who take our products, we do rating anyway for our, for the credit worthiness. They've asked us to do also an ESG. And this is the kind of the ESG register profile, very easy to understand. It gives a pure benchmarking. What's your score on E, S, and G? Where does the industry stand? And therefore, what steps can you take to sort of do better? Okay. I will not go into this. I want to end with this. The pessimist complain. This is about a quote on winds of change. Okay. The pessimist complains about the wind. So are you a pessimist? Are you going to complain and crib about ESG? I don't want to do too much of cost. Okay. The optimist expects us to change. So they expect, I'm optimist, ये तो चला जाएगा, ये तो रहेगा नहीं, कोई खर्च नहीं करेगा. It's not making sense to me. Or are you a realist who adjusts the sail, right? That this is the wind of change. And the beauty of the winds of change is, if you are in the path where the wind is blowing right, you go to a bank, they are talking about ESG. You go to a fund, they are talking about ESG. You go to the government, they are talking about ESG. Go to a corporate, they are talking about ESG. You will be able to move much faster if you have the wind behind you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Preeta. That was very, very interesting and helpful, and I hope our MSME participants here gain from that. Thanks for bringing that focus on that. And I think in a sense, also answering a question that was raised earlier, that there is a downside to not sort of complying or being ready with ESG, but there are plenty of business opportunities, and we'll talk more about those business opportunities. Any quick question that for Preeta? One, we can just take one question and then we'll come back. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead quickly? Okay, I would request that if it's a DNB specific question, just do it offline, yeah? If it is about the larger issues that she's raised, then we'll talk about it now. Okay, I think let's, yeah, go ahead. If it's about Preeta's presentation? Yeah, go ahead.
So actually our industry, we are also working, means we have exports happening in Europe and US. One of the challenges that we get is, like, for example, German would be having their own. The English would be having their own. And we have Italy who is having their own. Now, at the end of the receiving end, catering to these requirements, how do we assimilate all these together on a one page? Because resources we are looking at lesser resources for the industry. And you have on top of that IMS and RC and so many other regulations we are already doing. And that becomes, how do we address that?
No, I completely agree with you, because it's evolving. So like we have our BRSR, some other country has their own regulation. So it's an evolving space, I think. But there are certain commonalities that they're looking at. So I think we'll have to, so you'll have to work from those lines, right, to see what is common, but meet the standards. So if anybody who wants to work in India, they have to do the reporting as per the BRSR standard. If you want to do in EU, you have the ERS, you have to do it on those standards, right? That is the challenge. But I think it's all going to drive towards a common standard. They're all talking about it. I think in the next few years, you will see that also emerging.
Thank you. I mean, this is a problem that is not going to go away tomorrow, but there are people trying, all of these organizations are trying to find a solution to it. I don't think you will find a perfect solution. So I think this is one of the costs of being in business, I'm afraid. So you'll have to be just ready for it. But as Preeta said, there are a lot of common elements in it, and I'm sure our other speakers can also speak to it. But let me now come to you, Mr. Baheti. And hear your perspectives. And if you can also just bring in a perspective of how do boards look at the whole issue of ESG, because we keep talking about the tone at the top, we talk about the CEO, but ultimately it is also boards that need to push this agenda. So if you could speak to that. And also, as a company, how do you look at this in your value chains? Because I think that's the weak underbelly for most Indian companies when it comes to anything on the ESG. We get our own house in order because that's easy. We can maybe go to our tier 1 suppliers with some difficulty, but it's not something that we've solved for. But the moment you go beyond tier 1, it becomes more complicated. So I was wondering if you could just bring in both these perspectives into your deliberations and thoughts. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, my fellow panel members, and thanks FGI for providing this platform. To be very honest, I'll be the least qualified person to speak on ESG, at least in this August gathering. But like Shankar sir suggested, I can give you some thoughts on how at the top ESG is talked about and how do they guide and how do they then ultimately measure the performance on ESG. So till few years back, I think the standard compliance reports, as we call it, which we used to send to the boards, were all plant heads, all ESG heads, safety heads. They will send a certificate that we are all in compliance with flana regulations. And board used to have okay. And the secretary used to say, the board takes that into, board noted the same. And that's that used to be the case maybe till about 5-7 years back. Increasingly, as responsible corporate citizens, as well as pressure from regulators, boards have started taking this more seriously, and what do I say? They want a more factual and an analytical presentation, or at least inputs to them. The biggest problem which operational managers feel, that we all thought that we are all compliant with ESG regulations, but the measurement system was very weak. How do we actually measure it? I follow this rule, but have I done anything specific to reduce CO2 emissions? Have I done anything to preserve water? And if I have done it, how do I measure it? Have I done better than the previous year, or am I the same, or I have gone down? So few years back, I'll give my own example. Few years back, we started this practice of measuring every single activity which had an impact on ESG. And having measured a base year, we started setting our targets, that 3 years down the line, for 3 years this is the target, for 5 years this is the target. And we didn't go beyond that because we didn't have an experience of setting targets for higher ESG compliance voluntarily. But then we found that, okay, there is a maxim that anything which gets tracked gets done. Like Mr. Shankar said, you track profitability, so people around the organization work for it. You track growth, people work for it. But because you were not tracking ESG in measurable terms, for people also that was like a side activity. So we decided that we should track it, and we identified 5, 7, 10 areas. I have this first report, but I have a report which is also on my website. Some people who are interested can have a look at it. I will probably offer it to panel members also if they wish. So each of the activity we put a base number, and then we put a target. And we found that because we started tracking it, we were achieving those targeted numbers ahead of our own set timelines. There were no external pressure, there was no regulatory pressure, because we were always compliant. But because from the board and then from the chairman, the message went that this is our target which we need to track, I think we did it ahead of time. And that reinforces that if your attention is there from the top, people would be more serious about it. So few simple things, but I think pretty important things are, like we did a target for CO2 emission reduction. We did a target for renewable energies. We set a target for, consumption of water. So first objective was zero discharge, which of course we were compliant earlier, and we reinforced that. But how do I reduce consumption? And we are a pharma company. We are a API company, which needs a lot of water, and ATP is a large cost. But how do we reduce consumption of water itself, rather than recycle it and reuse it and not to discharge it? We measured, we put a number, and then we worked for it. Plantation of trees was another this thing, because any development, whether you like it or not, some nature gets destroyed. We bought additional pieces of land just for greening the area, just to create a green belt, far higher than what was required on a minimum basis. The fact that we were US FDA compliant company, and a lot of our revenues were coming from US, probably we were little ahead of our fellow corporate citizens in Vadodara at least, in these matters. But I think a lot of this gets driven from inside. So my suggestion from the board perspective is create measurable, quantifiable targets. Set a deadline, set a timeline. You may not meet it for some of the cases, but many of the cases you will do ahead of time. How to measure is also not easy, let me tell you. I mean, you have to involve so many people, particularly for large organization, multiple sites. So Shankar, it takes so much of efforts, and people wonder why are they wasting their time? Why are they doing it? We are all following rules. But why you need those measurements? But I think my experience of last 3, 4, 5 years of closely working with this ESG team is it helps. It helps to measure, quantify, set targets for specific reductions, and that helps. And if it comes from board, nothing like it. I mean, people can't take it lightly. I mean, people can't afford to ignore it or put less weightage on that.
Thank you. Thank you. That is, I think, very helpful, the tone from the top. And I think what you said is very important, measurement and tracking, because that's really when it's taken seriously. I will come back to you after we hear from Mr. Shah, but one of the questions that will be interesting to explore is how has the company gained from this? What has been some of the, not necessarily quantifiable, but you can see that there's been a benefit. I think it'll be interesting to explore that, and that's a question also with you, Soumitra, that we will explore. But thank you for that, and we'll come back to this. Any quick question? Yeah, why don't you go ahead? And then 2 questions, and then we'll go to Mr. Shah.
Now, E for different people in the organization, the meaning sounds very different. Like at the top of the pyramid, E means environment, economy, and everything. But at the bottom of the pyramid, they only mean economy. That means they need to take care of their basic needs. How do you amalgamate everyone together and make sure that this E stands common for all the people in the organization?
That's a philosophical question.
How do you ensure? How do we ensure
outside the course, as they say, for this panel? So we'll come back to you. It's an important question, and I think in many ways the social dimension of the ESG does talk about that, because if you look at, for example, the national guidelines for responsible business conduct, there is a whole principle around what you do with employees, not just full-time employees, contract, casual, on the value chain. There is a lot of that work. There is a whole notion of benefit sharing. How do you share benefits that you're making from, and I remember doing some work for a company that makes Ayurvedic products. And one of the things that it was very conscious about was it was using traditional knowledge to make those products. And it was constantly trying to figure out how does it share some of the profits with the providers of those traditional knowledge. So there are opportunities here, and some of these frameworks, that's why the framework is more important than the reporting that happens. So there is thing, but it's a good question, and we should maybe discuss it more over lunch.
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Do you want to, is that a question to Mr. Baheti, or is it a general question to the?
A general question.
Okay, then if it's a general question, we'll come back to it. Question noted. Let's go to Mr. Shah's presentation. I think.
Would like to answer.
Sorry?
Soumitra sir would like to answer.
You want to quickly answer that?
Well, we do ratings from the top 4 companies. So we assess our performance by looking at people like MSCI, CDP, all of them, the top 4 or 5. So you see where you are against each of them, right? So which one will the investor pay more attention to? That's a tough one to answer. I don't really have the answer, but in order that investors with different lenses look at the company, you should be working on raters and rankers from at least 3 or 4. That's what I would say. Then the investor can pick. You can't change the investor's mind, right? So they will pick what they want to pick. But that's what we're trying to do, just to address everybody. Can't pick one just now. There's no silver bullet that I know.
So let me let you into a little secret. When I was in the Tata Group, we did a survey. We contacted 20 global investors and asked them this question on how they look at ESG, sustainability, ratings. And one of the things that came out very clearly is that they look at ratings, but they don't take decisions on ratings. You've got to understand that. Each investor has an investment thesis based on which they use data. So they are more interested in the report rather than the ratings. That's the inputs that they take. But an investor doesn't sit in his room and decide whether to make an investment. There's a lot of work that they do with board, with the companies, and so on before they make it. But don't be under the impression that's your silver bullet. You get a good rating and you will get the money coming in. Not true. Over to you. You will take us through some of the regulations because that's a big driver. Yeah, you can use that, please. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, FGI, for giving me this opportunity. I would like to go through some of the slides, not more than 10 slides, which speaks about the ESG framework, reporting, and standards globally as well as typically for Indian companies to follow. Yeah, this slide speaks about the evaluation of regulations for non-financial disclosure in India. It started from 2015 and now in 21 to 23, we are at BSR. It started all from BRR, business reporting, and then now it is BRSR. But the next slide speaks more about the mandates which have changed over a period of time. In 2009, the MCA issued National Voluntary Guidelines NVG on corporate social responsibility, followed by, in 2012, top 100 listed companies market cap wise mandated by SEBI to file BRR based on NVG. 14 CSR came into force. 15 requirement of filing BRR was extended to top 500 companies from the 100 companies, followed by 2017 SEBI circular adoption of integrated reporting on a voluntary basis by the top 500 listed companies. Next in line, 2019 NGPRC, the extension of NVG, that is National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct, released in March 19, and SEBI extended BRR requirement to the top 1,000 companies, first 250, then 500, and then 1,000 companies, listed companies, FY 1920. And in 21, SEBI came out with a circular mandating BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainable Reporting, BRSR for the top 1,000 listed companies from FY 22-23, which is already started by 1,000 companies. So what are the needs for sustainable reporting frameworks and standards as per our country and globally as well? Because it's a very broad and evolving subject area. Differing priorities, understanding and subjectivities, because depending upon the industry, the issues are different, the priorities are different. There is an absolute absence of historical and well-established reference point based on which somebody can take out the reference point and report. It's a rapidly evolving regulatory landscape. As we have seen in the previous slide, the landscape, regulatory landscape is changing very fast over a period of 5 years. From nothing, now 1,000 companies in India are required to mandatory and now voluntary and then mandatory reporting BRSR. There is a potential of greenwashing. Now, some example of greenwashing. Coca-Cola, Danone and Nestle have been accused of making misleading claims about their plastic water bottles being 100% recycled. So there are so many greenwashings going on by corporates and by reporting under ESG, that is BRSR. This is going to be stopped to the major extent. The next point is challenging and assessing comparing performance, because there are not much comparison as far as the reporting are concerned. As I mentioned, each industry have a specific, as far as the waste generation is concerned, the water consumption is concerned, the energy consumption is concerned, employee welfare policies are concerned. There is a lot more riding on non-financial disclosure, because it's a ever-evolving area of disclosing non-financial disclosures. Now, ESG reporting framework and standards. This is a brief structure about the structure of BRSR. There are three. I will not go into much details about the structure. Section A speaks about a general disclosure. It requires basic company information including proximity to environmental sensitive zones. Speaks about section B, talks about management and process, policies and processes on leadership, governance and stakeholder engagement. This as far as the part B is concerned. Section C, principle-wise performance, speaks about information aligned to each NGRBC principle and core element. Now, all this information is divided into the two parts, the essential, which is the mandatory disclosures, and the leadership, which are voluntary disclosures. Now, this is the overview of a global reporting frameworks. As far as India is concerned, it is BRSR. GRI is also world famous, well-known standards the companies are following, and integrated reporting IR framework. Now, BRSR is developed by a regulatory body, that is as far as India is concerned, is SEBI. GRI standard is a non-government organization. Same way, IR framework is also non-government organization. Geographical specificity. Now, BRSR is specifically made for use for Indian companies, whereas GRI standard, there is no specific, I mean, it's a globally accepted standard. Any company, even in Indian companies, used to follow the GRI standard before the BRSR or BRR came into force. Same way, IR framework is concerned, there is no specific to any country. Industry sector specific. As far as BRSR is concerned, currently sector agnostic is a provision for a future. As far as GRE is concerned, sector program is definitely underway, and IR framework is not industry sector specificity. As far as underlying principle under which a BRSR functions it falls under NGRBC 9 principles of responsible business conduct. So all the reporting requirement is followed by following the 9 principle of NGRBC. GRI standard follows the triple bottom line approach. Some speaker, our co-speaker has mentioned about the triple line in the previous session. It speaks about the economic, environment and social. This is a triple line approach. And IR framework follows the value creation model. The structure of disclosure is principle-wise disclosure and GRI topic-wise. IR framework, there is no indicators. As far as BRSR commonly used as standalone disclosure, which is annexed to the annual report of the Indian companies. As far as GRI is concerned, a standalone report, which is called a sustainable report, and IR framework is integrated with annual report. So this is the difference between all the three standards. Degree with integration with financial disclosure, as far as BRSR, no. GRI, economic disclosure without integration, and IR, integration of financial capital with other forms of capital. And regulatory mandates in India, mandated by SEBI. As far as GRI is concerned, it is voluntary. And as far as IR framework, voluntary adoption by top 1,000 companies which are already encouraged. Now, something on BRSR, the Indian regulator's requirement. This BRSR raises the bar for ESG disclosure in India. The principles under which BRSR reporting is taken out, these 9 principles are mentioned: ethics, product life cycle, employee well-being, stakeholder engagement, human rights, environment, policy advocacy, inclusive growth, and customer value. Now, BRSR is an updated ESG framework mandated by SEBI for the top 1,000 companies. This is expected to be used as a single source for sustainable reporting related information in India. The reporting of BRSR was voluntary for FY 21-22 and is mandatory from FY 22-23 for 1,000 companies. BRSR is not merely presenting the data which is collected and presented, but an approach to drive an organization commitment to the sustainability. BRSR provides investor and other capital participants with information about companies, sustainability related risk and opportunity. Somebody was asking about what are the benefits of BRSR as far as the investor is concerned. The foreign investors and large investor definitely looks at how the company reports BRSR as far as India is concerned. BRSR would enable comparability across companies, sector and time for progress tomorrow. The key features are mentioned. So how ESG is transforming the corporate landscape. This is a slide. It's a C-suite and board buying these very senior level executives, and under the board, they are now involved as far as this opportunity. They are made responsible. Climate change, companies now accept that climate change equals financial risk. So before 2 days, I was attending a global conference of our accountants. And then one of the speakers mentioned about, it was a session on risk and opportunities as far as the sustainability concerned. He mentioned about what are the top 10 risks the industry is going to face over the next 10 years. First, he mentioned about technological disruption, that is digital disruption taking place every day now. And the second is climate. These are the two, apart from others, like cyber risk, governance issues, blah, blah. But then, other than these, the top 2 is technological disruption and climate. So we can understand now how important the complying ESG requirements and BRSR requirements as far as all companies are concerned. Access to capital. While following these all disclosures, you are more accessible to the investor for getting the low interest rate capital. I will give example about very large engineering conglomerate as far as India is concerned. I was reading some newspaper information before a month ago. They took about billions of dollars loans about their projects. And then suddenly because they are following all these regulations very meticulously, and then one of the lender has sent them the mail, since you are following very nicely and our board has decided to offer 0.25% reduction as far as the interest is concerned. That amount to $55 million. Can you imagine the kind of quantum, the benefits which are going to be received? Regulatory development, ESG related compliance cost and disclosure requirements continue to evolve. One has to accept that. This is an additional cost. Reporting standards, measurement and reporting of ESG related information is maturing rapidly. People are understanding it now more maturely. Stakeholder pressure. See, again in the same conference, I was coordinating with the Reliance Industries CFO. He mentioned about, that was a session on sustainability only. He mentioned about his experience that till the time, even before 1 year, our large investor, they used to ask the questions on environment and then protection and ESG and all. But from the last financial year, their first address is on environment and protection, how you are taking care of the greenhouse emissions and how you are taking about the waste generation and all. It has taken the priority seat. So please understand that the stakeholders, for the stakeholders, particularly the foreign investors, this has become a priority area now. The talent, it definitely attracts the talent if you follow the ESG guidelines voluntarily or mandatorily. Now, assurance part, the key issues. Assurance on sustainability disclosures. FY 22-23 BRSR, as we mentioned, mandatory reporting of top 100 companies. Assurance is not mandatory for FY 22-23. From FY 23-24, the core BSR core, which falls into 9 ESG attributes, is mandatory for top 150 companies whose market caps is highest 1 to 150. From FY 24-25, ESG disclosure for value chain of listed companies is going to start. The mandatory required for top 250 companies for their value chain partner. This is a very important area and is definitely more challenging for the corporates to report, to gather the data from their value chain partners. 25-26, assurance for value chain of listed companies. The assurance is going to start in the next year. Say, only disclosure is going to start in 24-25, but the assurance is going to be, because assurance is going to be provided by third parties. So whatever you are reporting has to be endorsed by third-party verification agencies. From 26-27, reasonable assurance of BRSR core is mandatory for all top 1,000 companies. So please understand that from 26-27, it is going to be, is not voluntary, is mandatory, as well as it has to be accompanied by assurance certificate. As far as India is concerned, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has come out with standard SSAE 3000 on assurance, because it's not going to be like this that a assurance agency somehow give you the certificate. No, they have to follow the standard, how the assurance certificate is also required to be given. And then these are the top BSR core attributes available everywhere. But that I would speak about top 10 international sustainability standard in 2023. European Union CSRD, UNFFS, IRRC, TSFD, ISSB, which is from IFAC, IFRS S1 and S2, which is called CDP, B Corp, and more widely accepted is GRI and Sustainability Assurance Standard Board, SASB, and ISO 14000 and ISO 26000. These are the two series specifically meant for the disclosure of ESG. Now, this is a general slide about the ESG assurance, how the world at large, the companies are following. There are figures mentioned again each countries, Germany, US, China, South Korea. Then the first square is for out of eligible companies, how many companies are reporting ESG? Say for as far as the India is concerned, let us look at it. So 98 companies, eligible companies are reporting ESG reporting, out of which the second table is rate of ESG assurance, only because ESG assurance has not started, but then 37 of the companies have voluntarily started providing assurance as far as India is concerned. And out of which 63% of assurance being provided by audit firms, CA, chartered accountant firms and other eligible agencies. So this is the brief idea about, say, if you talk about the United States, it is 99% and 17% and 11%, okay. In France, 196, they are following rate of ESG assurance and 98% being assured. So this is an example how the companies at large, worldwide, is following ESG assurance. Now, we spoke about the mandatory requirements, ESG, how companies should cope up with the advantage attached with this. But then there are challenges attached with the compliance. Before I start, I'll give a small example of somebody was mentioning. Yeah, only one slide. After that, I'll give. So, ensuring data accuracy across wide range of areas to ensure that there is no misrepresentation that compromise credibility of BRSR report. So that is a major challenge the ensuring data accuracy, there, whereby the assurance agency's role would come into. So sudden change in reporting requirements. Say every company is facing this issue. The reporting requirement has been increased. The formats have been kept on increasing. The mandatory requirements are kept on increasing. So there is an issue to follow as far as the companies are concerned. Second, increase in cross-department inputs. Say, as far as earlier is concerned, any mandatory requirement from SEBI used to be handled by the secretarial department. Now it is not the case. Secretarial department cannot handle this. It has to be in coordination with HR department, EHS department, IT department, R&D, purchase, operations, and production department, everybody. So to coordinate, to integrate these departments and then workers and take the final information and report and get the assurance is a challenge. Increase in performance expectation from the stakeholders. As I mentioned, many stakeholders, the large institution investors are expecting the companies to follow these guidelines thoroughly. So according to me, ESG compliance is not a destination. ESG compliance is not a destination, but a roadmap for every organization that is committed towards sustainability. It is a roadmap. Challenges on this path can be encountered with diligent planning and commitment. Thank you.
That's bang at 1 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Shah. And I intentionally requested you to come at the end because you had a lot of detail to provide, and I think that was something that everybody can digest over lunch. But in case for the digestion to complete, if you have any 1 or 2 questions for Mr. Shah, this is the time. Yes, please.
What do you think will be role of civil society organizations or non-governmental organizations? Because a lot of them have to do with community, whether you talk about Coke example or Vedanta example. Thank you.
So as far as the...
I'll just take another question. You keep it. Is there another question you can take? Yeah. Why don't you ask then you can respond.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Shah, what is the linkages between CSR and BRSR? Because there is a good linkage between that. So how the company can take benefit in both the cases?
Okay, I'll take you first. See, CSR is kind of subset of BRSR reporting. In the reporting requirement, there is a special clauses where the companies are required to inform or report as far as the CSR activities are concerned. So it's a subset. So definitely, if the company follows the CSR in a good way, then the rating or marks as far as the score is concerned, which is going to be provided by other agency, will definitely increased. As far as the non-government organizations are concerned, as you mentioned, I think the reporting requirement is voluntary for them. It is not mandatory, right? So in whatever manner the non-government organization or not-for-profit organization or Section 8 companies can prepare and submit is voluntary. So as far as the voluntary concern, there is no strict measurement of the criteria and then how you are going to be, it is measured in terms of how you are reported. I hope I have addressed your concern. Who can achieve, I mean, you meant to say? Yeah, please.
So I think your question is what role can civil society play in this? I think, you see, let me just go back a bit to the time when we were involved in the drafting of the NGRBC and the BRSR. I was involved in both. And we took early on we took a very important decision that we will make the NGRBC voluntary. That's why the NVG also had a V in it. But we should make the disclosures mandatory. And the idea was, and SEBI was thinking the same, and then MCA and SEBI spoke, and that's how this happened, and these two converged. The idea is to put things out in the public domain. Fundamentally, the reporting, and this is an important point to make, fundamentally, a company that only looks at reporting as an external document is missing a huge opportunity. It is first a way of looking at your own performance and how you do better at it. It is also, so it's a mirror and a window, both. Now, moment it becomes a window, this is where all stakeholders have access to information of what a company is doing. And it is therefore, civil society, for example, might be interested in Principle 3 on what's happening with employees, Principle 8, which is on inclusive development. You can actually start looking at what a company is doing and raising these issues in different fora and push companies into performing better in some of those things. Or you could be challenging companies to do that. So there are multiple roles that, as civil society, as one of the stakeholders of the company, can use data in different ways, including telling a company, going to a company and saying, look, in this you're not doing too well, we are happy to help you, can we get into that? But you need that data, and that is what the NGRBC provides you. It provides you that window, which is very important. We are at lunch, so I think we need to close this session, but I'm going to request each of the panelists to just say a few closing words, and then we can close for lunch.
Yeah, so thank you very much and for your patience, because we are now, getting into lunchtime. So just wanted to thank you, and I hope some of the discussions that we have, encourage you to do. One thing I'd leave you with a thought: if all of you are investors, maybe, even though the investment opportunity may not look so wonderful, but put some money into some ESG rated bonds and stocks. That's what I would. Thank you.
I think you said it. It's an investment. Let's not treat it as an expense only. It's an investment which over a period of time, like all other investments will pay for itself. So I hope all of us are a little more enlightened today. And important is draw concrete measures with targets.
Thank you very much.
I would just continue with Mr. Baheti, say that I hope all of you, if you have not started on the ESG journey, you will do that. And whatever you do, it has to be measured. I think only then can you manage it. And money's there, investment opportunities are there, growing your business, profitability, all that will follow through. But you have to at least look internally and start in that journey. Thank you.
I would only suggest that all of us have to change our mindset. It is not because of the ESG requirement, the mandatory BRSR requirement is started as far as India is concerned. But we have to change our mindset. Earlier we used to be very casual about the employee welfare, the emissions, the emission of gases, waste generation disposal, energy consumption. But now all these things are going to be measured and certified by assurance professionals. And then those reports are going to be looked by all stakeholders, including the investors. So if you do not follow it rightly, then definitely you are going to lose as far as the monetary aspects are concerned, as far as the regulatory aspects are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's about sums up our session for this panel. Thank you all very much for your participation, for your questions, and we look forward to lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Just before you break for lunch, a quick... Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for a wonderful session. I think it was a kind of a tough topic which was carried off well. Excuse me, jara 2 minute roka sir. Hello, jara 2 minute. So thanks again for a wonderful session. We'll take the photographs, don't worry. So I think we've gone through probably the why and the what of sustainability and ESG. As we come back after lunch, somebody told me, you've given me a dead man slot. So we're trying to make that interactive and interesting. We have a virtual conversation with Mr. Eric Solheim. Then we'll have 3 wonderful companies making presentations on their ESG and sustainability journeys. And of course, then we have question and answers with with two entrepreneurs who are treading the, what should I say, the narrow paths on sustainability. So we'll have a lot of learning from them, the practical side of it. Please be here at 2. I think I was told that I shut off the earlier session 10 minutes early. So we would just quickly break for lunch. Just as we break, I think we are planning a couple of takeaways from the conference, and which we'll be discussing post-lunch. One is that we are looking at a cluster for a capacity building workshop. I think a lot of you asked, how do you go about it? And typically MSMEs have this question. So there will be some contours of a workshop discussed post-lunch, and FGI is more than happy to support that initiative. And of course, we are also documenting the entire proceedings of the day. I'll be requesting all the panelists to share their presentations, and we'll make a complete document and share it with all the participants and FGI members. So thank you once again, and see you after lunch. I think he wants to take a picture. Disappointed, he wants a photograph. Why don't you also join us?